Iranian authorities denounced Israeli attacks against civilian targets, this time against the Al-Farabi hospital in the west and the Iranian radio and television headquarters in Tehran. Russia fulfills its obligations under the Istanbul agreements and delivered more than 6,000 bodies of Ukrainian soldiers to Kiev. And in the United States, President Donald Trump orders to escalate deportations and focus on so-called sanctuary cities amid growing protests against his policies. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Stay with us. The Iranian government denounces Israel for launching new threats and attacks against civilian targets, this time against the Al-Farabi hospital in the city of Kermanshah in the west of the country. Authorities report that the Israeli attack led to the activation of the air defense systems following the bombing of the military base in the Kermanshah region. The Iranian government warned that its attacks have only been against Israeli military bases, that it has not attacked residential areas, but if the Zionists continue their assault, they will give an immediate and forceful response, as Israel has caused at least 224 deaths and 1,277 injuries, most of them women and children. And in this context of Israeli aggressions, the Zionist forces bombed the Iranian radio and television headquarters in Tehran. Sources add that there are martyrs and wounded in the Israeli airstrike against the Broadcasting Corporation building. Iranian television anchor Sahar Emami resumed her work minutes after the channel's studios were hit by Israeli airstrikes. Meanwhile, all Iranian Broadcasting Corporation channels are broadcasting normally except for the Al-Akbar news channel. For their part, the Israeli occupation army threatens to bomb police stations in Tehran. Iranian air defenses are fully in operation in the Persian capital. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian denounced the violations of international norms by the U.S. government and its position on the conflict with the Zionist government of Israel. The Iranian leader reiterated that they did not want war and did not start it, also emphasizing that they are always open to dialogue and negotiations. He also stressed that his country is not developing nuclear weapons and that as a sovereign nation, it has the right to use nuclear energy for research and peaceful purposes for the benefit of society and not to suffer loss of life or property. In this regard, Russia, China, other governments and organizations around the world have condemned the Zionist attack against Iran, while the United States has defended Israel. And in Iran, the health ministry announced that 70 women and children died in 3 recent Israeli attacks in Tehran. Authorities added that with this new information, the number of people killed by Tel Aviv strikes since the start of its hostilities against Iran now stands at 224. It is notable that 90% of those killed are civilians, following the Zionist attacks on residential areas. They emphasize that at least 10 of the fatalities are scientists and staff from nuclear energy facilities, and 3 are high-ranking officers in the Iranian army. The hostilities carried out by the Zionist entity since last Friday have affected at least 18 Iranian provinces. And the Iranian Revolutionary Guard confirmed the assassination of its intelligence chief Mohammad Qasemi and his assistant Hassan Mohaqqaq as part of Israeli airstrikes against the Iranian territory. In this context, the intelligence commander Mohsen Bagheri lost his life due to shellings made by Israeli swarm drones in several Iranian areas. Subsequently, the Iranian agency reported a series of missile operations against Israeli intelligence centers. Moreover, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard confirmed to continue effective operations against vital targets in Tel Aviv until their complete elimination. Iran has been pursuing Operation True Promise 3 in response to the Israeli offensive against its territory on June 3rd. The Iranian government could decide to leave the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty following some nuclear signatories, as Israel had violated it by having attacked 3 nuclear facilities of Iran. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Magheri announced that the parliament is preparing a bill to endorse their exit. In this regard, Magheri highlighted that Iran has been always opposed to the development of nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, President Masoud Pezeshkian reaffirmed the nation would defend its inalienable right to harness nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. Furthermore, the leader denounced that the United States resorted to intimidation as Washington allowed Israel to strike. The authority further underscored both states violated international regulations. In addition, he remarked Iran has never looked for nor initiated a war. And in this context, Russian President Vladimir Putin and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan issued a statement after a telephone conversation condemning Israel's action against Iran, considering that it aggravates the situation in the Middle East. In addition, the text pointed out that this new attack against another state in the region represents a clear violation of the United Nations Charter and other norms of international law. The leaders called for an immediate ceasefire and the resolution of controversies, including the Iranian nuclear program, through political and diplomatic means. And Doctors Without Borders urged European Union leaders to persuade Israel to stop the siege of Gaza. The Secretary General of Doctors Without Borders, Christopher Lockyer, described Gaza as a hell on earth, byproduct of almost 2 years of unstoppable shellings. The humanitarian movement said that over 1,000 members were working in Gaza. The organization further revealed they had striven to run 6 clinics to fill hospitals and provide support to other care centers in the enclave. In addition, the entity unfolded they were living on 1 meal a day. Therefore, the humanitarian movement spurred EU foreign ministers to make the right decision on their upcoming debate on June 23rd regarding the suspension of the association agreement with Israel.
We're in Brussels today to deliver an open letter with a clear message to leaders of the European Union ahead of next week's Foreign Affairs and European Councils. Our message to the leaders is simple. We urge you to use all political, economic and diplomatic tools to exert real pressure on Israel to stop the carnage in Gaza and to allow unhindered humanitarian aid.
Healthcare staff in Gaza is operating beyond the limits of human endurance. And they themselves, as it was said, they have been displaced several times. They need to leave the medical activities to take care of their family. They have lived a total disruption of their normal life and of their social and supportive network. The mental health toll on our staff is heavy and on everybody. In the last 2 months, we have seen at least 3 of our staff that have had to be admitted to the hospital, and they become patients themselves. And this is not sustainable. This is not human. So we really call for action now. We need humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. Now we need this to stop.
We now have our first short break coming up. First, remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We're going to be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Russian Federation complies with the agreement established in Istanbul by delivering more than 6,000 bodies of fallen soldiers to the Ukrainian regime. The head of negotiations on behalf of Russia, Vladimir Medinsky, said that Moscow received a total of 78 bodies of Russian soldiers from Kiev. Medinsky indicated that the exchange of prisoners of war continues, along with the exchange of seriously wounded soldiers on the front lines. Russia and Ukraine reached a humanitarian agreement during talks held in Istanbul on June 2nd. And G7 leaders arrived Sunday in the Canadian Rockies for a summit where they will consider whether to take a common stance as violence intensifies between Israel and Iran. Security personnel and helicopters were posted near the G7 summit site in the mountain town of denounces in the Canadian Rockies as heads of states including U.S. President Donald Trump, European Union Commission leader Ursula von der Leyen, United Kingdom Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and French President Emmanuel Macron arrived for the three-day gathering. In this context, the leaders of Canada, the United Kingdom and Germany arrived in Calgary ahead of the G7 summit before taking a helicopter to the actual summit site in Kananaskis, Alberta. The G7 summit will be held since June 16th to June 17th. And in this context, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer meets his Italian counterpart Giorgia Meloni for a bilateral encounter ahead of the G7 summit. The meeting provided an opportunity for an in-depth discussion on the most pressing issues on the international agenda, starting with the situation in the Middle East and the conflict in Ukraine. They continue with their close coordination regarding both the G7 agenda and the NATO summit in The Hague, converging fully to views. Lastly, both leaders reviewed the main areas of bilateral collaboration, especially in the fields of energy, investment and security and defense, as well as the increasingly fruitful cooperation in fighting human trafficking.
And then many bilateral topics, many very important things that Italy and UK are doing together.
Also in Canada, hundreds of people gathered in downtown Calgary to protest against the G7 summit. Many demonstrators expressed their disagreement with U.S. President Trump's presence in Canada after he had been advocating for the idea of annexing the country for months. Some 400 people subsequently marched through downtown Calgary, which led to the closure of several streets. Former Canadian Parliament member Charlie Angus launched a campaign for the government to ban Trump from entering the country, calling him a convicted felon and a sexual predator. The meeting's host, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, scheduled to hold a bilateral meeting with Trump on Monday before the formal start of the summit sessions.
In his campaign speech, Carney, when he was debating with everybody, feels like you guys are just shoving this.
In our news, in Italy, a couple of dozen protesters unfurled a banner Sunday in Venice calling for a halt to new hotel beds in the lagoon city. Organizers underlined that nearly 17,000 tourist beds had been added to the city of Venice since 2017, despite a hotel block in the historic center adopted that year by the city. The protesters moved unobstructively from the first stop in Troncheto, an island not covered by the hotel block, where a 648-room hotel has recently opened and where another is being built, to the Calle dei Guardiani structure. Details of the protest weren't advertised and it was kept small and non-confrontational.
This is the Calle dei Guardiani complex that was taken over by Delta Real Estate. When it was taken over, there were 18 apartments inside. It had also been a public housing complex in the past. Then it had several changes of ownership. Delta Real Estate took it over and evicted the last remaining resident tenants, among other things, starting renovation work while the elderly residents were still inside. From 18 apartments, they took over 33 units, all for tourist rentals. This is the first Hampton by Hilton chain hotel to open, 648 beds on an island that was one of the few places of potential urban transformation and could have hosted investment to implement services for residents, which the city notoriously lacks.
We have a second short break coming up before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back. The U.S. President Donald Trump ordered immigration enforcement agencies to heighten raids against migrants in Democrat-led governorships. On social media, the Republican leader reaffirmed that immigration and customs control agents must increase their efforts to detain and deport all undocumented migrants in cities as Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York, which he described as the core of Democrat power. The main goal of such anti-migrant policy has been to accomplish executing the largest mass deportation program in the history of the United States. In this regard, President Trump noted the deployment of border patrols and law enforcement agents on urban cities to repress the likely outbursts of rallies against anti-immigration actions. Also in the States, the suspect in the assassination of the U.S. Democrat Congresswoman Melissa Hortman and her husband was captured. Law enforcement officials said Vance Bolter, 57 years old, was arrested on Sunday following a two-day manhunt in the Midwestern state. Bolter allegedly shot two Democratic lawmakers and their spouses early on Saturday morning in what officials believe was a politically motivated attack. Melissa Hortman, a state representative, and her husband Mark were killed in the attack, while State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette were injured. Lieutenant Colonel Jeremy Geiger of the Minnesota State Patrol said Bolter surrendered to the police without any use of force. Five people were killed and 3 went missing in northwestern Virginia when flash floods caused by heavy rain hit the United States. The authorities reported that rescue efforts were underway on Sunday to find 3 missing individuals. They also indicated that between 6 and 10 centimeters of rain fell in just half an hour on Saturday night, prompting an almost immediate influx of emergency calls for trapped individuals. Governor Patrick Morrisey declared a state of emergency in Ohio County. At the United Nations, Venezuela demanded the elimination of sanctions and unilateral economic blockades imposed by Western countries on sovereign nations. During his speech, Venezuela's Foreign Minister Ivan Gil recalled that the coercive and illegal measures imposed by the United States and its allies only serve to generate economic instability and heighten political tensions in the region. The diplomat also noted that the Venezuelan people are subject to over 1,000 U.S. and European sanctions, resulting in economic losses exceeding $640 billion. Hill also expressed solidarity with Cuba, which is affected by U.S. blockades, and demanded that Washington remove the Caribbean nation from the list of countries allegedly promoting terrorism. And thousands of people marched in Colombia's main cities on Sunday in protest against the attack on right-wing presidential pre-candidate Miguel Uribe, who is hospitalized in intensive care. The 39-year-old senator was shot 3 times during a public act in a popular neighborhood of Bogota last Saturday. The demonstration also spoke out against the recent escalation of violence that has plagued several regions of the nation and attributed to criminal groups outside the law, which left at least 8 people dead and more than 80 wounded in the southwest of the country. Police have already arrested 3 people allegedly involved in the crime. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thanks for watching.